If you're looking for a little Dante Moore HEISMAN hype, you just might find it on today's show.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Spring game thoughts continue. NFL draft talk, that's today. And Oregon plays Liberty. Late tonight was Nate Bittle snubbed. That could be a good thing if he was. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. So, have you gone over to our friends at FanDuel and looked at the Heisman Trophy odds for next year? I have because, well, this show is my job, and I love it very much, so thank you for allowing me to do that, first of all. Second of all, Dante Moore is fifth. He hasn't started a college football game in 2 years, and he is fifth in the Heisman odds. Last time he started, he ended up getting benched because he wasn't able to protect the football consistently. And I have not been aboard the Dante Moore Heisman hype train since, look, he hasn't actually been announced as Oregon's starting quarterback. For all we know, it is an honest-to-goodness quarterback battle that will continue to rage on throughout spring practice. I hope it is. I truly hope it is. I don't know that it is, but I really hope that it is. But here's the angle for Dante Moore that could really work out in his favor and why he has some similarities to Bo Nix. When Bo Nix was at Auburn, he competed there for 3 seasons and had some good years, did some good things, but did not live up to the 5-star quarterback hype. And in fact, as a transfer, according to 24/7's metrics, graded significantly lower than Dante Moore. I don't know how all that exactly gets worked out, but Bo Nix was a lowly 3-star transfer who then had his 5-star capabilities maximized with the Ducks. Why? Because he had a better support system around him than what he had at Auburn. He suddenly had a running game. He had a stable offensive line. He had some good receivers down at Auburn, but suddenly he came to Oregon, and, well, year one he had Troy Franklin and Terrence Ferguson. Those are NFL targets. And Tez Johnson didn't run a great 40 time, but I think still finds his way onto an NFL roster and was a really good college player regardless of what he does in the pros. You give a guy a good support system with some great running backs who can make plays, and all of a sudden he becomes a better version of himself. And that's how I look at Dante Moore and say, if I want to be optimistic about, if Dante Moore wins the starting job over Austin Novosad, and hey, maybe Achilles Smith Jr., you never know, as a true freshman, that would be a heck of a story if Achilles Smith Jr. walked onto campus and was a starting quarterback. Not expecting that one, but hey, have crazier things happen? I don't know, actually. I don't know if crazier things have happened than that hypothetical. But when Dante Moore started at UCLA, I won't say that I'm up to date with what UCLA's 2023 offensive line was like. I don't know that it was great. I don't think it was terrible. From what I remember, it was okay. When they played Oregon in 2022, I think that offensive line was pretty good. I don't know if it was as good the next year. I know the defense, of course, was really good. But when you look at what he had around him, it wasn't a horrible complement of players. Now, he was a true freshman, of course. He's learned from Dylan Gabriel for a year, talked with Will Stein for a season about all this stuff, should have everything between the ears to be ready to succeed. The question then becomes, well, what's he got around him? Well, his first season back at UCLA a couple of years ago, his wide receivers were J. Michael Sturdivant, Logan Loya, and Kyle Ford. Now, Kyle Ford was a super highly rated recruit, but never hit 400 receiving yards in his career. So it didn't quite fully pan out. Logan Loya, don't think he would stay. He's kind of like Gary Bryant Jr. to me. I think those guys are pretty similar. I think Gary Bryant Jr. is a little bigger with more speed. I don't think Loya would start on this receiving core. The only exception is J. Michael Sturdivant. If Oregon, if I had the option to bring in a transfer wide receiver, and the guys were between Malik Benson, who they did bring in, of course, from Florida State, one-time JUCO player, then Bama, then Florida State, now Oregon, third team in 3 years. We'll see if it works out and finally comes together for him. If I had a choice between Benson and J. Michael Sturdivant, I would take JMS. Absolutely. He went over to Florida. I'm a big fan of his. So he had a number one capable wide receiver. His tight end was a familiar name for my everydayers out there and a lot of you Duck fans, Maliki Mataval. It's a respectable target. It's not Terrence Ferguson. It's not Kenyon Sadiq. I think Oregon's upgraded there. The receiving core, I think, will be better. The offensive line, I'm curious. I suspect it'll be an upgrade. And the offensive coordinator position, why don't we call it a push, since we know Chip Kelly is indeed still, in the modern era, a really good play caller. And Will Stein has put back-to-back quarterbacks as Heisman Trophy finalists in his 2 years with the Ducks, which is a pretty incredible feat that I should repeat more on the show. Like, Oregon's OC in his first 2 years calling plays at the Power 4 level has sent two different quarterbacks with two pretty different skill sets to New York City. That's pretty good. That's not saying he's perfect all the time. Nobody is. But that's pretty darn impressive, and nobody else right now can say that in all of college football. So, Chip Kelly to Will Stein. Oh, and by the way, UCLA's running backs that year, I think we're as good as what Oregon will have this year. And that's a credit to what the Bruins had that season. And I also like what Oregon will have at running back this year. You've got Mekhi Hughes, the Tulane transfer. You'll have Noah Whittington backing him up. And then your reserve guys are some combination of Dink Riggs, Jaden Lamar, and Jay Harris. I think the running back room is good, but both those guys ran for over 800 yards. So it's not as if he was poorly supported. I do think, though, going back to the Bo Nix comparison, he is better supported now. So a lot of what has to happen for Dante Moore to reach his full potential that we all know he had coming out of high school and still has, it comes down to him. He's got to be able to read defenses better. He's got to be able to make better, quicker decisions. You go back and look at a couple of the interceptions he threw. Sometimes he's late. Sometimes he's telegraphing. But hey, he's a true freshman, so we can cut him some slack. But still, very rarely do you see guys win a Heisman Trophy without an elite complement of players. So I do still think that being fifth in the Heisman odds is slightly overvalued compared to where I think he should be in the top 10, just because I expect Oregon to be a playoff team. And I do think he has the receiving core with Evan Stewart, and we'll see what happens with Decorian Moore, the 5-star true freshman, number one receiver in the class. I'm so excited to see what he brings to the table. He'll probably be the most interesting guy to watch going into the spring game on April 26th. But you've got plenty of wide receivers. Justice Lowe's coming back. Jerion Dickey, does he find a role? Kyler Casper, Malik Benson, Gary Bryant. There are just a lot of guys. I feel great about that room. It'll come down to how does the offensive line gel and how does he execute the offense compared to what he did when he began his career. And if you're curious, the four guys currently ahead of him for Heisman odds in order from 4 to 1 are Jeremiah Smith, this wide receiver at Ohio State who's pretty good, Cade Klubnik, third-year starting quarterback at Clemson and a senior, Arch Manning going into his first year at Texas, no surprise, and then Garrett Nussmeier, probably the most proven quarterback in all of college football down at LSU, with the highest ceiling as well. I think he and Klubnik are both in that mix, and they're both right there. But that makes Dante Moore the outlier. So I don't anticipate Dante Moore being able to be in that conversation this year as much as I do next year. However, it's hard to not recognize, he's got better tight ends to throw the ball to. He's got better receivers to throw the ball to. Should have a better O-line. Had a good offensive coordinator both times, but now he's a much more experienced guy, and he's been sitting and learning and watching for a year. So what do you think about Dante Moore winning the Heisman? You let me know in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. What about this spring game concept? What about playing Oregon State? Well, no, that's not the right idea. I still think this is the right idea, though. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. That's nissanusa.com. 5hourEnergy.com. That's where you go. And if you need a little boost, 5-Hour Energy is what you are looking for. Daylight savings snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that loss of hours sleep, then 5-Hour Energy has your back. As always, the extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, which is what I'm usually doing, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, I do that too. 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Extra daylight, extra activities with longer days. You need more energy to get through it. And Tropical Burst is my go-to whenever I need a quick boost. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery store or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Check out 5-Hour Energy today. All right, my everydayers are really starting to tell that I love this spring game idea of playing against another team. There are roadblocks. There are absolutely roadblocks, but I do think it would benefit Oregon in the long run. So Connie suggested playing Oregon State in the spring game. I don't think that's the answer here. So the reason is Oregon and Oregon State should always play. I don't care what conference everybody is in. Those two teams should play. Good for Oregon. You get a road game every now and then. That's not a huge travel. And you get some semblance of normalcy of the past, of tradition, and appreciating all that, which is slowly dissipating in college football, unfortunately. And when you're on the road, you get a road game where you don't have to go all the way across the country. And for Oregon State, it's a game that should continue because the Beavs need to have every opportunity they can to play against a Power 4 opponent. And even if you only beat the Ducks 1 out of every 10 years, it's going to be worth it for that 1 year. And if that coincides with you trying to build a playoff resume, it's going to be a heck of a boost. So I think that game will continue. Seems like there is momentum on both sides for them to continue playing in the major sports, but we'll have to wait and see. But with regards to that being the spring game opponent, I get the logic of just driving across town. The reason I don't think that would work is because when you're playing a team who's on your schedule, I think that's where coaches will raise their hands and say, yeah, we're not in favor of that because I don't want these guys to get a look at us before we play them. I don't want them to see stuff that everybody else can't already see with regards to our spring game. So, you know, and they wouldn't show anything less, I think, than what they, you know, ordinarily do in the spring game, which everybody can, of course, you know, record the game and watch on TV to see how, you know, how they run this or what they're doing with that formation, all that sort of stuff. But seeing it up close and personal, would it make a huge difference? No, I don't think so. So I get, Connie, I understand where your head is at, but I don't think that the coaches would like that. That's why I suggested yesterday, just as an example, that Arizona State would be a really fun team. Like if the spring game on April 26th at Autzen was against Arizona State and it was, you know, just kind of a glorified scrimmage of sorts, which is what the spring game really is, but it was against somebody else, I think you'd get a better look at what Oregon brings or what Oregon has. I think the coaches get a better look, fans get a better look, I'd get a better, everybody would, right? Be a more entertaining product to put on TV. I think that would all be really good. Now, an obstacle is that I saw people bringing up in the comments yesterday, which is a good point, is that if you were to set up home and home spring games, doesn't that mean every other year fans can't go to the spring game? Okay, that's a really fair point, because if they weren't able to go, you know, one of the reasons that I'm a proponent of keeping spring games around, and I'm glad that Dan Lanning has said publicly, yeah, as long as I'm here, we're going to have a spring game, is because for a lot of fans who either don't have the time or don't have the money to go to Autzen Stadium in the fall, it's their one chance to go in there and watch the team play. But it's a great pro-fan event, and I am aggressively pro-fan in sports because most of the powers that be in college sports in particular are not. So I do understand that concern. I wonder, maybe it'd be too much travel, but maybe you could work out 2 spring practices with people where, hey, for one of your spring games, you travel, but then you have another one that's a spring practice of sort. I don't know. Like, I just see that as an opportunity to grow spring football and raise people's interest level and their attraction to the sport. Scott threw out a suggestion down in the YouTube comments and said, well, what about bringing Stanford up? I think that'd be great. And Stanford could bring, I don't know, Sacramento State or somebody for their spring game, and Sacramento State could still have their own. It doesn't have to be a full-on game, even if it's just kind of, doing drills against one another, kind of like what they do in the NFL. I think that could be worked around. Certainly, you're adding a bit more travel to the spring slate, but it's not as if, it's in the middle of the season. So, adding to, it's more travel and whatnot. It'd be like one trip, one trip somewhere. I'd be fully supportive of that. Would the coaches and players go for it? Maybe. I think more looks of your players going against other teams would be a really good thing. I think it'd be a really good thing for coaches. I think it'd be more fun for players. I think it'd be more fun for fans. So yeah, I'd be supportive of, 2 spring practices against another team or 2 spring games. I don't care. I'd find a way around it, because I do hear you on a lot of people, especially with how Oregon works in a food drive to their spring game. I'd hate for that to become an every other year event. I don't like how that sounds. I hope there'd be a workaround to where they could still make it happen or have a day. Maybe if you go somewhere one year for a spring game against somebody else, and then the next year you come back home, maybe in that year where you go on the road, you have a spring practice day for your fans where you kind of organize your own spring game just against yourselves like you have right now. And then the game against somebody else, the scrimmage against somebody else, could be in addition to what you're already doing. Just an idea. But the Stanford one, if Stanford came up, yeah, Oregon's better than Stanford, but still, I want to see them against somebody else. I think that'd be a lot more fun. So I'm still very much, not everybody's on board with it. I get it. I get the hurdles, but I think you'd be able to overcome them if you went about it making smart decisions. Just put me in charge, guys. I'll do it. Fine. I got time. Scott sends in this question. He sent in a couple. I'm starting with his second question here on today's show. Second, I share your rooting interest for both the Ducks and the Seahawks. Are there any Oregon players you think would be particularly good fits for and possible picks of the Seahawks? I always love the marriage of my college and pro rooting interests, but bring a load of bias to my analysis. What say you? More broadly, if you could be the hand of God or Roger Goodell, which NFL teams would you place our draft-eligible Ducks? Thanks as always. Well, I won't go through every single player, because some of them I think not that it doesn't matter, but Josh Connerly's going to be good wherever he goes. Derek Harmon's going to be a stud wherever he goes. Other guys, it's more scheme specific. Last year, I called for Bo Nix to be drafted by the Broncos. He was. What do you know? It's a match made in heaven. They went to the playoffs this past season. So I think with this year's crop of Oregon draft picks, I think the only guy that I'd say is, needing the right scheme or right fit is Dillon Gabriel. And I think the answer to that is the Arizona Cardinals, because they have a small quarterback already. I don't know that, Gabriel is Kyler Murray light. He does have a strong arm, but Kyler Murray has an incredibly strong arm. Kyler Murray is a significantly better athlete than Dillon Gabriel, which is why Kyler Murray was the number 1 overall pick and Gabriel may or may not get drafted. Obviously, I would love for him to, but he came back to Oregon because he got an undrafted free agent grade. You have the sort of season he had. I have a hard time believing his draft stock didn't go up at all. I still think there is a pretty low ceiling on Dillon Gabriel getting drafted this year, just because of his size. That's just the NFL, whether you like it or not. So going back to your first question about the Seahawks, no, I don't think there are any fits this year. And that includes Connerly and Harmon, because that's not where the Seahawks' priorities should be. They need to build an offensive line, but they already have 2 tackles. I mean, maybe a Johnny Cornelius at right tackle, but Connerly's going to be a franchise left tackle in the NFL. Seahawks already have that guy. They need interior offensive linemen, and between Nishad Strother and Marcus Harper, neither one of those guys are high-end NFL draft prospects, so I don't think there is a massive fit there for any of the Ducks. Seahawks secondary is pretty set. Yeah, trust me. I was hoping at one point in time in NFL free agency that the Seahawks would sign Marcus Mariota. So I'm right there with you, Scott. I love when those interests collide. It's one of my favorite things in the world, truly. But, I think Connerly will be great wherever he goes. Harmon will be great wherever he goes. Jordan James is a really interesting one to me because Bucky Irving was the number 2, but now he's probably going to be the number 1 going into next year. Jordan James is a very different runner. I think Jordan James on the Ravens would be awesome. They are all about being a physical downhill. At the very least, as a rookie, he could be what he was as true freshman at Oregon, a short yardage specialist, and they have all sorts of packages like that. And yeah, they have Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry can't be out there every single play. And I see Jordan James. I don't think there are a lack of similarities between him and Gus Edwards, who's been a running back on the Ravens for a while. I don't know if he's still there. But James is definitely not someone who I'd want. Like Jordan James on the Cardinals, I don't think that's not a real fit. I think he needs to find an old school. Jordan James on the Chargers, sign me up. Power, hard-nosed running football, that's where he's going to thrive. So those are a couple names. If there's anyone else specifically you wanted me to address, let me know, and I'd be happy to answer it on the show. But I think that most of the guys are just not scheme or team specific. Like anybody could draft Connerly. Anybody could draft Harmon. Jordan Birch could work on the Seahawks, but they just signed DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys. So, that probably won't wind up happening, but hey, you never know. I'll keep rooting for it. So, Oregon Hoops tonight, Liberty, 10:10 Eastern. March Madness is so great. My bracket's doing great. Thanks for asking. Was Nate Bittle snubbed? I don't know, but I hope he feels that way.
The NCAA Tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA Tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
So, Oregon's trying to win an NCAA tournament game for the second straight year. I'm not going to say the stat. I'll hopefully wait until after a win. I will have a reaction show, win, lose, or, well, those are the only two outcomes, of course, against Liberty tonight. I'll talk about that game more in a moment. But a rare basketball mailbag question came through, which I'm always down for. Mailbag question: do you agree Nate Bittle was snubbed from an All-American team? Not even an honorable mention. He and Jackson Shellstad were both third-team All-Big Ten. Nate Bittle and TJ Bamba were both the All-Big Ten defensive team. But no, actually, I don't think Nate Bittle was snubbed from an All-American selection. Now, Bittle is having an outstanding year. You may or may not know that he's Oregon's leading scorer on the season. Shellstad is second. They've got 4 guys that average double-digit points per game on the year, which is this Oregon team in a nutshell. And then you've got Angel that averages 7.5 and Evans that averages 6. This is an incredibly deep, capable offense, and they have played well in large part for the last couple of months. But it's the NCAA tournament, so anything could happen. Though I was with you when you first sent in this question. This came from DWC Sports. That, yeah, man, I really think he should have. I mean, he's, on a watch list for one of the best big men in the country. He's having, this great year, 14 points, 7.5 boards, over 2 blocks a game. Like, how is he not in there? I don't even know that he was close or that he should have been close, which is not to say he didn't have a great season. He did. And is still having, and hopefully continues having, a great season for the Ducks. And hopefully comes back next year for a 5th season with Oregon, which he has the ability to do. But when you go look at the numbers, because I was perusing the All-American teams, his numbers don't compare. And I think for an Oregon team that, was in the national spotlight early, faded a bit, heated up late, ended the season ranked inside the AP top 25, Oregon has the pedigree to get a guy onto an All-American team, but his numbers simply aren't there. There is some crazy good bigs. On the third-team All-American team, on the third-team All-American team for college basketball this year, you've got Hunter Dickinson, who himself is an incredibly veteran big, and his numbers are just better than Nate Bittle's. And you go look at guys that are on the honorable mention team, and you realize, yeah, their numbers are just better. You've got guys like Ryan Kolkbrenner over at Creighton, and Creighton slashed Louisville in the first round in Lexington, by the way, like an hour or so drive from Louisville's campus, and Creighton just absolutely obliterated them from the jump. And, we should remember how good Creighton is because they beat Oregon last year. Oregon should have beaten them, but Creighton's a really good program, good team, and Kolkbrenner's at the center of it all, literally, because his numbers are phenomenal. He's like 19 points and 9.5 rebounds a game or so. And you go look at the rest of the bigs, Bittle doesn't have the numbers to stack up. Now, if I were Dana Altman, I'd be whispering in Nate Bittle's ear, they didn't even give you an honorable mention. You were third team All Big Ten. Say whatever you want. Call Dan Lanning and say, hey, what sort of movie should I show before film breakdown in our team meeting to get Nate Bittle in the right mindset here? Because we all know Lanning is great at that. Oh, man. I can't wait for those Ducks versus them videos to return. Anyway, so no, I don't think he was snubbed. Third team All Big Ten along with Shellstad. I think it was pretty appropriate. The Big Ten's got 8 teams in the Big Dance, and so far they're doing pretty darn well, and hopefully Oregon continues that trend. But as crazy as it sounds, it's just a deep lineup of bigs in college basketball this year, and 14 to 15 points a game and 7.5 boards and 2 blocks. Yeah, that does not make you one of the 3 or 4 best statistical centers in the country this season. But that leads up to tonight against Liberty, as you're listening to or watching this show, where the Ducks are taking on the 12-seeded Flames, and it will be harder to beat Liberty in basketball than it was in football. If you remember, I believe the final score was 45-6. That was Bo Nix's final game, and that was a bittersweet day. Nice to go out with a win, but wasn't the game that Oregon was hoping to play in. But that's where Oregon football's at. Win a Fiesta Bowl. Yawn. That was not a real yawn, by the way, but that sounded really good, at least on my end. Anyway, so beating Liberty in basketball is going to be significantly tougher because your greater talent doesn't have as great a chance to shine through because you only have 5 guys on the field at a time, on the court rather, instead of 11 guys on the field, which is why you see more upsets in college basketball. So Oregon's favored in this game. They should be. I think they are going to win. I don't know how easy it's going to be, but Nate Bittle could be in for a big game. He is every inch of 7 feet tall. He releases the ball up high, not just on his jump shot and his fadeaway, but on his hook shots as well. He does a great job, not getting his shots blocked a lot. He could be in for a huge game because Liberty's a small team. One of their guards is under 6 feet tall. They don't play any bigs that are taller than 6'9". So he's going to have at least a 3-inch advantage on anybody who's trying to guard him. Now, maybe he sees a host of double teams, Kolkbrenner over at Creighton saw a bunch earlier today being as I record this show, and Creighton was able to hit a bunch of threes as a result. Well, if that's the strategy that Liberty comes at Oregon with when they try to get the ball to Nate Bittle, he's got to be able to make the right pass. And I think Nate Bittle's a really good passer. I think of a lot of times this year when he's found KJ Evans or Brandon Angel cutting to the basket for an easy 2, kickouts for 3. Oregon's got to be able to move the ball and set themselves up in the right spots to play offense the way they're capable. Again, if that's where Liberty goes, and I just suspect that if they don't start there, doubling in the post automatically, it'll get there. Because if you're going to throw some Conference USA 6'9" bigs at Nate Bittle, he's going to go for 25 to 30 points. Maybe they're comfortable with that. That's what Oregon did to Luka Garza a couple of years ago in the NCAA tournament when they played Iowa as a 7 seed. That game against VCU got vacated because of COVID within VCU's program, and then they played Iowa, and by the second half, they were blowing them out. I think Garza had like 28 points and 12 rebounds. And they said, yeah, we'll let you take as many as you want. We just need to contain all these other guys and that turned out to be a really good strategy. So at some point, how Oregon handles the double team in the post is going to be there. If not, then Bittle could have the sort of game he had against Washington when he put up a career-high 36 up in Seattle to end the regular season. Same city, different arena, but Bittle could be in for a huge game. And I think Oregon tries to establish him early and often in this one because of that size mismatch and forces Liberty to adjust. And I also suspect that defensively he should have a good game, but he's got to stay out of foul trouble. That has been the one bugaboo for Bittle at times this year. I think he has been screwed. I mean, screwed by officials throughout the course of this year. That happens when you're a big guy, but he has been on the wrong end of bad calls at both ends of the floor a lot. I don't know why. I've seen it more with him than anybody else. I felt like Dante, got a lot of calls because he was so physical. I feel like Bittle gets punished for being a big guy down there sometimes. So he does commit some fouls that are not necessary or not smart, and he's got to stay away from those. But if he does, I think he's in for a big game. I don't know that, the All-American snub is something that the Oregon staff could legitimately play into, but hey, you do whatever you do to get your guys motivated for the game. So, Oregon, Liberty, all their reactions show up later tonight. Talk to you then. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.